Hello, my students. This is your favorite teacher, Mr. Jacobson. I'm excited to be with you. Today, we're going to talk about the land that is south of Egypt. Known as Kush or Nubia. And we're going to learn about the people just south of the border of Egypt. So let's begin. So here, as you can see, this is the map of both Egypt and Nubia. You have lower and upper Egypt, and now you have lower Nubia and upper Nubia. So this is what we're going to mainly be focusing on is down below. As you see, the Nile is very big. It doesn't stop at Egypt. It went all the way down. Nubia also benefited from the Nile as well. So there's a lot to learn about the Nubians and who they were and what they did. So first I want to talk about Nubia and Kush. They are the same. If I talk about Nubia, I'm talking about Kush. The only difference is Kush is actually the kingdom that was located in Nubia, and Nubia is the land south of Egypt. That's it. They're pretty much the same thing. If I talk about Kush, I'm talking about the land of Nubia. South, and I talk about Nubia, it's where Kush will eventually originate from. So the geography of early Nubia. Nubia is south of Egypt. You can see it starts pretty much around the third cataract. The Egyptians called the kingdom of Kush. Nubia was rich in resources like gold, copper, and stone. So the Nile's flood allowed Nubians to plant both summer and winter crops. The Nile provided grazing land for animals. By 2000 BC, one of the leaders took control of the other villages and made himself king. This began the kingdom of Kush. So I want you to pay attention. The Nile floods allowed Nubia to plant both summer and winter crops. That is a pretty powerful thing that if you can have crops going year round. And so Nubia is going to benefit greatly from the Nile River in that respect. So Kerma, it developed close ties with Egypt to the north. The Egyptians were happy to trade. They loved trading, especially as people who were so close. They also admired Nubian skills in warfare, and they even hired many Nubian warriors to fight in their armies. They were palsies. However, like Egyptian pharaohs, the kings of Kerma were buried in tombs that held precious stones, gold, jewelry, and pottery. So even kings from Kerma, they kind of were already trying to adopt a lot of Egyptian practices. These items were as splendid as those found in Egypt during the same period. So Kush became a supplier for Egypt in gold, copper, stone, ivory, and many other things. Kerma became a wealthy kingdom. Its artisans made fine pottery, jewelry, and metal goods. Sometimes Kush and Egypt lived in peace and helped each other. So as you can see here, we have uh, elephant tusks, and these tusks are actually, from elephants. As you can see, it's a lot of elephants they've had to rip them off of. However, ivory is very valuable. Especially now, it's still valuable. So a lot of good things with ivory. So why don't we take a look at what some items were made out of ivory? Let's see here. So here's a beautiful ivory bracelet that was crafted. Here's an ivory figurine of some kind. Even today, ivory is still very valuable, but it's illegal in many places to sell ivory. I don't think America you can do that anymore. I could be wrong, but I know there are some very strict laws of people trying to sell ivory in other countries, including Africa. So Egypt's conquest of Nubia, relations between Kush and Egypt were not always peaceful. The Egyptians liked them at first. They traded with each other. They admired them for their work ethic. However, Kush grew wealthy from trade, and Egyptian pharaohs were worried that Kush would get stronger than Egypt. Can't have that happening. So around 1500 BC, Pharaoh Tutmos III conquered everything north of the Fifth Cataract. So you can see down here, you got the all the way down to the Fifth Cataract. So if you don't like how powerful they're getting, then why not just, I don't know, destroy them, conquer them? And that's exactly what the Egyptians did. And they're gonna be in their conquering for over 700 years. So we have Egypt, who has now conquered Nubia, and the Nubians are gonna, for 700 years, they're gonna be very accustomed to Egyptian lifestyle. In fact, they're gonna be pretty much considering them Egyptian. So many Egyptians settled in Kush. Egyptian became the language of Kush. Many Kushites used Egyptian names and wore Egyptian style clothing. Kushites also adopted Egyptian religious practices. So take a look at this picture here. What do you see? Oh, yes, you see pyramids. So in Nubia, we have pharaohs and other high administrators. They are now issuing the same kind of practice where they are building pyramids for their dead, albeit not as grandiose as the Old Kingdom's pyramids. But nevertheless, this just shows that Nubians are going to start copying and have copied the Egyptians. So a change of power after the New Kingdom ended in Egypt around 1000 BC. Kushite leaders regained control of Kush. Finally, the new kingdom's over, the oppression's over, and now we can be our own people again. By 850 BC, Kush was powerful again, and the kings ruled from Napata because Kerma was destroyed by the Egyptians. Remember, the Tutmos III destroyed Kerma, which was their first capital, and they're going to rule from Napata. So, a Kushite king, Kashta, conquered Upper Egypt. So now we have a Kushite king from the land of Nubia after the new kingdom, and now they're going to conquer Egypt. And Kashta's son Pi believed the gods wanted him to rule all of Egypt. And in 716 BC, he accomplished this. So the Kushite kingdom extended from Napata all the way to the Nile Delta. So it's interesting how that group, which was once oppressed and even conquered, is now going to be the conqueror, which they are now in control of Egypt. So Kushite kings believed they were heirs of the great pharaohs of Egypt's past. They believed that they were some Kushite kings would even try to try to change their genealogy to make it look like they fall in line with the original pharaoh line. Oh, well, my great great grandmother was, so and so, and this was a cousin of this pharaoh, and so then they try to skew it so they could claim that kind of royalty, if you will. They restored ancient practices and renewed faded traditions. So the Kushites, they loved Egypt. They loved Egyptian. It was a superior culture in many aspects, and so they wouldn't bring in Nubian culture. They would bring in Egyptian culture and even try to renew some of the old faded traditions. Kushite pharaohs were buried in pyramids and built new temples to Egyptian gods. So the end of the Kushite rule in Egypt. Assyrians invaded Egypt. Remember the Assyrians? We talked about this already. So the Assyrians invade Egypt and they conquer Egypt. They don't conquer Nubia, but they conquer Egypt. So the Assyrians invade Egypt while the Kushites were in control. The Assyrians' iron weapons were better than the Kushites' bronze weapons. So remember, the Assyrians, we talked about this, they had an advantage. And this is part of their advantage. Kushites were forced back to Kush. Kushites' interactions with Assyria, albeit through war, allowed them to get iron, and they began using iron for farming and conquests south of Nubia. So, in some ways, it was a good thing that they lost to the Assyrians because at least They learned the technology of iron, which is going to greatly increase their ability to rule further down in Africa, where the Assyrians and Babylonians later and the Persians don't want to go all the way down. So good stuff. Anyway, so that's pretty much it. That's the end of Egypt. That is the end of our chapter. We are going to be having a test soon. Exciting, exciting. So go ahead and write your one-page summary, and I look forward to discussing with all this with you at the beginning of the week. Until then, bye bye.